Gabby Petito. A Gabby Petito update. Let me ask you a question. Is Dog the Bounty Hunter maybe barking up the wrong tree? Well, we're going to answer that and a whole lot more right here on today's Charlie Crime Buster, the fastest 30 minutes in podcasting. Hello and welcome to today's Charlie Crime Buster episode. We're going to be introducing into our podcast today Dog the Bounty Hunter, a.k.a. Dwayne Lee Chapman, the 68-year-old TV reality star, who has found his way here to Florida and is, so he says, quote, hot on the trail of Brian Laundrie. But I have to ask you, is he barking up the wrong tree? Well, first, a quick whiz through the timeline. This time, focus on Brian Laundrie. Now, we know that Brian Laundrie was on a cross-country trip with his girlfriend, fiancée, Gabby Petito. They were documenting their trip on social media. And those postings, they showed two young people free and happy with the appearance of the love of their lives. What the post did not show, though, was the on and off and up and down relationship through the years. What it did not show was the red flags of domestic abuse that made this, in my opinion, a murder in slow motion. Body camera video released to the public regarding a traffic stop in Utah, that was at the entrance of the Arches Park, that opened the public's eyes to perhaps trouble in paradise. By the way, I am going to be releasing a brief Charlie Crime Tip episode to, get this, re-examine that traffic stop in the next day or so. You see, the video that was first released by the police department there in Utah, it showed the scene from Officer Robbins' body cam. But now they've released some new body cam footage from another officer. And there are things that were not available regarding the traffic stop from Officer Robbins. Now, would that change my mind on the way the cops handled it? Be sure and stay tuned to my special short episode on that's coming out in the next day or so. Check Charlie Crime Buster on Facebook, or for more information, just go to your favorite podcast platform. We're going to be releasing that so that you can see that as well. There you can get a perspective of that traffic stop from a cop, and that's on the newly released information. Back to our main focus. Is Dog the Bounty Hunter barking up the wrong tree? In order to understand that, as I've said before on the podcast, the best way to tell where a fugitive is, it's to understand where the fugitive has been. You see, this is a key investigative tool, which make timelines so very important. Now, we know that Brian Laundrie returned to Florida on September the 1st. That was this year. You see, the van he was driving, it was caught in one of our license plate readers we have here in the state of Florida. And that would confirm the day of his arrival back into the Sunshine State. Now, on September the 4th, Brian was seen at an AT&T phone store, where he may have purchased a new cell phone with a plan. No, contrary to what you may have heard, the phone, my friend, was not a burner. By the way, most people do not go to a major brand store to purchase burner phones. Just saying. And on September the 6th and 7th, Brian and his family camped out at the Fort DeSoto Park in Pinellas County here in Florida. Now, according to the records, there was a checkout on the 8th of September. And then on the 11th of September, Gabby's family there in New York reported her missing. And on that same day, Newport, Florida police knocked on Brian's parents' door. That's where he and Gabby had been living. And the police there, well, they were basically handed a lawyer's card, and they refused to speak to police. The department there did report that they did not see Brian while there on the property that day. And on the 14th of September, now this is according to Brian's family, well, Brian left to go hiking in the reserve park. That's near Sarasota, Florida. Now, police did not reveal if he said he was going camping or not. It was reported that he took a small backpack with him. And hey, you know that cell phone that was purchased earlier? Well, according to a close family friend, well, he left his cell phone and his wallet behind. Then on September the 15th, well, police then left a note on the Mustang that Brian was reportedly driving. The note requested that the vehicle would please be removed. I don't know if they said please or not, but it was parked in the area of the reserve, and there was a note on it to move the vehicle. Now, on this was the same day, by the way, that police announced that Brian was, quote, a person of interest, unquote, in the death of Gabby Petito. Then on September the 16th, well, the family recovered the Mustang. That's according to reports. And they also stated that they had left the vehicle there one more day, according to others, that they were hoping that Brian might come back to the vehicle and drive it home. Then on September the 17th, well, Brian's family contacted the police, and the police responded. There, they reported that Brian was missing. That's what they reported to the arriving officers. Yes, the same police that they did not cooperate with. Well, now, that same police is asked to help find their son, Brian. Then on September the 19th in our timeline, well, sadly, Gabby's body was found in Wyoming. Authorities had stated that the death was a homicide. And on September the 21st, well, the police then, they go back and retrieve the Mustang, and they take it in to process the vehicle. And they were armed with a warrant authorizing that search. Then on September the 22nd, that's when a federal warrant for the arrest of Brian Laundrie came down from a grand jury there in Wyoming. The warrant basically alleged that Brian had committed bank fraud between the days of August the 30th and September the 1st. And this, my friend, was a felony charge. Then on September the 25th, that's when Dog the Bounty Hunter knocks on the door of Brian's parents' door and enters the search for Brian Laundrie. Now the dog is leading the team to search the Fort DeSoto Park in Pinellas County. And I'm asking, is Dog the Bounty Hunter barking up the wrong tree? And we're going to answer that question in just a moment. But first, now it's time for our Courageous Citizen of the Week. And this comes in regards to the 911 call that alerted officers to that first traffic stop.
And we're driving by, and I'd like to report a domestic dispute to Florida with the Florida license plate, white land, gentleman, 5'6" beard. They just drove off. They're going down Main Street. They made a right onto Main Street from Moonflower.
Or what were they doing?
Cooperative, but what do you say?
What were they doing?
We drove by, and the gentleman was slapping the girl.
He was slapping her?
Yes, and then we stopped. They ran up and down the sidewalk. He proceeded to hit her, hopped in the car, and they drove off.
It was this call that brought cops into the lives of Gabby and Brian. You see, this individual saw something that day that led him to believe that this young lady was in danger. He could have walked by, not got involved. It was not his fight. It was not his daughter. It was, according to some people, well, none of his business. But no, he took the courage to call, to report domestic violence. Now, I do not name this individual in order to protect his privacy, but I hope that all of us will take a lesson and follow his example. If you see something, say something. Contact your local police. If you know someone in an abusive relationship, call the domestic hotline. That's at 1-800-799-7233. 1-800-799-7233. We'll leave this in our show notes or in the description you see on this episode at your podcast platform. But this man who took the time and demonstrated courage, well, he is our Charlie Crimebuster's Courageous Citizen of the Week. Now back to our main focus. Dog the Bounty Hunter, a.k.a. Dwayne Chapman. Well, he's come to Florida in search of Brian Laundrie. Now, interesting enough, you see, Chapman, well, he has just as much authority as you and I do to assist in the search. For you see, he is not authorized to, quote, unquote, bounty hunt in the state of Florida. You see, we do not have bounty hunters here in the state of Florida. Here they are bond agents, and they are required to have a license in the state of Florida to work. The process to get that license is first to be a resident of the state. Next, they have to pass 2 tests and have a clean background with no felonies. And Dog the Bounty Hunter, well, he has neither a license nor a clean background for here in Florida. You see, in 1976, Chapman, well, he was convicted of a first-degree murder, and he was sentenced to 5 years in a Texas prison. He had been waiting in a getaway car while his friend shot and killed Jerry Oliver, 69 years of age, in a struggle during a deal to buy drugs. Chapman, well, he served 18 months at the Texas State Penitentiary in Huntsville, Texas. Now, he can, as a private citizen, just like you and me, search for Brian, and he would be eligible for the reward money, just like you and me. You see, I think that's up to about $80,000 or more now. And many have speculated about the motive for the Dog the Bounty Hunter. And I say Dog the Bounty Hunter, for you see, that name sounds much more sexy, doesn't it, than Dog the Bond Agent. Well, now, however, his motives for his insertion into this investigation, well, they have been debated. He says that he left his new wife on their honeymoon to assist because he, too, had lost a daughter. Some believe his sincerity, while others still question it. One of my friends, Jeffrey Browning, told me he's just trying to make himself relevant again. Well, someone else said, well, the dog has never seen a camera he did not like. And there are those who think that he's after the reward. Again, my friend, it's a reward. It's not a bounty. You see, Brian does not have a bounty on him because he has not skipped bail. He is a wanted fugitive. And, of course, some believes that Dog the Bounty Hunter, that his motives are pure. But you know, really, friend, we can never know the real motives of a person in this type of situation. And I asked you, does it really matter what the motives are if his assistance helps bring Gabby's killer to justice? Yes, I said Gabby's killer. While Brian has not yet been charged with Gabby's murder, well, his actions have at least showed what we call conscientious guilt. That's a term those of us who are involved in criminology refer to the actions of an individual that demonstrates guilt. In Brian's case, well, it was his suspicious behavior when he was picked up hitchhiking. His trip back to Florida in Gabby's own van, leaving her all alone. His refusal to cooperate with law enforcement, and more importantly, his refusal to even help Gabby's parents who were in desperate search of their daughter. Add to that, now he's seemingly vanished without a trace. So he needs to be found and arrested on the federal warrant charges as the state builds the murder case on him for Gabby. And Dog the Bounty Hunter, well, he tells us he's hot on the trail for Brian Laundrie. But my question is he barking up the wrong tree? Let me share with you how it's possible, and in my opinion, that he is barking up the wrong tree when it comes to searching for Brian. We're going to get to that and share with you exactly why I believe he is barking up the wrong tree. But now, it's time for our Crazy Crook story.
Crazy for feeling so
Well, that's our crazy crook music to introduce our crazy crook story. And our story today, my friend, now there are plenty of Florida man stories that keep us all busy with our crazy crook stories. But our crazy crook story today, well, it comes to us from another country. You see, there are crazy people all over the world, and there are crazy crooks all over the world. But this one comes from down under, an Australian kind of crazy crook. And here in America, as it is all over the world, you and I both know that gasoline prices are now skyrocketing. And along with that, a rise in the number of cases involving people stealing fuel. Now, a common way to do that is by siphoning off gas. Now, for our younger listeners, you may not be acquainted with the process of siphoning off gasoline. It does involve taking a short hose and sticking it down the gasoline tank, and then literally starting the flow by sucking on the hose. Well, hopefully getting the hose out of your mouth before the fuel is swallowed. Well, these industrious crooks in Australia, they were thinking big. For them, it was go big or go home. It was that kind of moment for them. You see, their target was a bus with a tremendous size gas tank, much like a Greyhound bus here in our country. So one night, in the cover of darkness, and in a hurry for a quick getaway, well, our crazy crooks, they took the hose, they placed it into the tank, and they sucked up the liquid. Only problem, they discovered way too late. They had stuck the hose not down the gas tank, but rather into the bus sewage tank. And you know, they do have restrooms on those passenger buses. So instead of sucking up gasoline, they sucked up poopaline. And the Australian coppers, they were not to be left out on the laughing. They had issued a statement. They issued a statement that they were, quote, keeping an eye out for the capers, only then to correct their statement. They said that they would not only be keeping their eye out, but they would be keeping their nose in the air for the scent or the stink of the perpetrators. And that, my friend, is our crazy crook story of the week. Now back to our focus story. Dog the Bounty Hunter, he's chasing his own theory of the case. There are several theories of where Brian may be. One, of course, is the search for him at the reserve where the family claimed he went. Another is the campground where they camped right after Brian had returned to Florida. You see, some of Gabby's friends had told authorities that they had hiked the Appalachian Trails and that Brian had sustained himself there for a couple of months. There are some who believe that he may be hiding in the woods, much as Eric Rudolph had when he eluded authorities, now get this, for 5 whole years. And there are wild claims that have him in Mexico, or in New York blending in with the crowds, and even as far as to Cuba. But our friend, Dog the Bounty Hunter, well, he's currently chosen option number 2. He believes that he is in DeSoto Park in Pinellas County, where there are little islands to hop onto and to hide. He believes that the Laundrie family returned to their home after their camping trip and that Brian did not return with them. And there are a whole host of people that are following him as he searches. He even found a campsite where someone had been camping, which fueled his search and gave him again more time before the camera. Now, I should say there is no notable presence of law enforcement in Dog's search. They're letting him kind of do his own things, it appears. And speaking of law enforcement, those brave men and women who are doing the job and searching out the reserve, please do remember that these countless brave men and women, well, they put their lives on every day to protect us. In fact, to date, there have been 327 line-of-duty deaths by these brave men and women this year. There were 76 in August, 54 in September, and while this month has barely started, well, there's been one a day. One a day officers have lost his or her life in the line of duty. That's for a total of 3 in 3 days' time at the time of this recording during the month of October. And please, my friend, remember, beside every one of these numbers is a human being just like you and I, and with a grieving family of loved ones. So we honor these brave men and women on this episode of Charlie Crime Buster. Think about the ultimate sacrifice they make, and the grieving families that they leave behind. Think about that the next time you make a joke about a cop and a donut. So, is Dog the Bounty Hunter, is he barking up the wrong tree? Well, I believe so. You see, while no one really knows where Brian is, and all of us have our theories, and those could be mistaken, I believe that Dog the Bounty Hunter is indeed barking up the wrong tree, and here are my reasons. First, number one, law enforcement are not spending their resources at DeSoto Park, and there's a reason for that. You see, while Pinellas County copters have made some rounds, there's not a notable presence. I know the sheriff of that county, and if there was a probable chance that Brian was in that area, I guarantee you he and his team would be all over it. And remember, it was the Pinellas County Sheriff's Department that sent the video footage to the FBI of Brian's family leaving the campground. Now, if Brian was not in that video, don't you think Pinellas County Sheriff's Office would be conducting searches in the DeSoto Park, along with tons of other law enforcement agencies? You see, there are some things that cops are not telling us, and that is one of them. We do not know what, if any evidence that was revealed on the video from the campground. We do know they have not made the park there in Pinellas County a main focus. Now, just as there might be another reason why our Dog the Bounty Hunter is not placing his focus on where the cops are now diligently searching. For you see, my friend, the reserve there near Sarasota, it is being searched by law enforcement and their approved partners. Dog the Bounty Hunter is a citizen like you and me, and he's not allowed to participate in that search. You see, while law enforcement appreciate the public and their tips and input by anybody anywhere, I can guarantee you cops are not interested in making this a reality TV show. And Dog the Bounty Hunter, well, he's not really given access into that particular search. So, you and I both know he, of all people, would not be standing on the sideline. He's going to follow tips regardless of how reliable they are, and there is always the chance that he might stumble upon something. But there's another reason why I believe Brian returned with his parents that day. Now, stay with me here. I believe that now that the FBI and the federal charges are on the table, you see, it's now against the law to lie to the FBI. We all know that men and women have gone to prison for doing it. And while I do believe that we as parents will do desperate things to protect our kids, I now do not believe that Brian's parents are risking going to prison when they do not have to, and they can still be protective parents by not talking at all. Remember, my friend, they reported their son missing when they did not have to do that. You see, perhaps that latest trip that the parents took to Orlando to meet with their lawyer after the federal warrant was issued, maybe that trip was to remind them now that it is a federal charge that they could indeed go to jail for lying to authorities. And on top of that, after the meeting, their lawyer issued a statement saying that Brian had returned with his parents from the camping trip. Now, while there are bad lawyers, just as bad cops and bad doctors and bad everyday people, I do believe that this lawyer would not tarnish his own reputation if he, too, did not believe that the parents were truthful when they said that Brian had returned with them and took a trip to the reserve. Rather, he would have simply advised them not to say anything, and he would not make a public statement to the case affirming that Brian had returned to the area. That is, if he knew himself that that wasn't true, because then he could be charged with a crime if he knowingly misled law enforcement. Now, it is quite clear that law enforcement, with some of the best skills in the world, that they're still focusing on the reserve here in Florida. Now, I know the question. I already know the question that's going on in your mind. You're right now saying, well, if that is the truth, why haven't they found him yet? Well, to answer that, I will need to remind you of another high-profile case right here in the state of Florida. That was the Casey Anthony case. Kaylee Marie Anthony. She was a little 2-year-old girl that captured the heart of America. You see, she was reported missing by her grandmother, Cindy Anthony. That was after she had not been seen for 31 days. Her mother, Casey Anthony, well, she had given her parents, George and Cindy, varied explanations as to where Kaylee was, and she lied constantly to the detectives that were investigating the case. That mother was charged with murder, however, surprisingly, not convicted. But get this. Precious little Kaylee, she was searched for by law enforcement and untold hundreds of others, including special search teams from all over the world, and yet her body was not found until nearly 5 months later. And are you ready for this? You see, on December 11, 2008, 2-year-old Kaylee's skeletal remains were found with a blanket inside a laundry bag in a wooded area. Now, hear this. In a wooded area near the Anthony family's house. Did you note that phrase? Near the family's house? You see, that area had been searched and researched many times, but here in Florida we have our wet seasons, and the ground in the area does some really peculiar things. Here is a quote from Chris Boyer, Executive Director of the nonprofit National Association for Search and Rescue. He says, quote, down in Florida during the summer and wet time, a body can start to skeletonize in less than 5 to 7 days. You see, the tropical conditions that we have here in Florida are very, very harsh when it comes to this type of evidence. And with terminal surveillance from up above, that could be helpful in finding warm rays a body gives out, even if that body was hiding out. But let me ask you a question. What if life has already left the body? Now, while there are some who do not want to think that Brian committed suicide, well, it would not be the first alleged murder to do so. Just this week in Florida, we've been following the case of Maya. Maya, who had been missing since September the 24th. You see, this beautiful young 19-year-old lady, well, her body, unfortunately, has been found in a wooded area during a search near an apartment complex. Now, the suspect, who, by the way, was the only suspect, was found dead of an apparent suicide on Monday, September the 27th, only 3 days after Maya was reported missing. So it does happen more often than you think that alleged perps kill themselves. Then add to that the dangers of living in a swampy land in Florida. Alligators are all about us. In fact, about 1 million of them live among us here. His body could be decaying in that swampy land of the reserve, not visible to searchers. Another reason he may be in the reserve, beyond the statement that his parents said that he was heading the reserve, well, there was a camera in the park that produced a blurry image of someone who had resembled Brian. Now, while cops are not telling us if this is indeed his image, you can rest assured that FBI experts have put the best digital enhancements on that image. That just may be what is keeping cops searching the reserve. And remember the video from the camping park in DeSoto? Well, that may have revealed that Brian was indeed with his family as they left the DeSoto park en route back home to the home of his parents near the reserve. Add to this, there are no visible sightings of the most wanted man in America at this time. All of that does lead me to believe that he is still in the reserve area. Now, while no one of us, including yours truly and Dog the Bounty Hunter, can be certain where Brian is, my guess is that Dog the Bounty Hunter is barking up the wrong tree. And my gut feeling is that the cops on the reserve near Sarasota, that they have the best chance of finding Brian. Now, that being said, if you have seen Brian or you have knowledge of where he may be, please contact your local law enforcement or call the FBI at the FBI National Hotline at 1-800-CALL-FBI or submit tips to tips.fbi.gov. Again, we'll have these numbers posted in the show note description page. So, my friend, we are still on the case of pursuing Brian Laundrie, also called the person of interest in the death of Gabby Petito, and wanted fugitive for bank fraud. Now stay tuned to your podcast platform for Charlie Tips. Some short listen-ins on the search for Brian. Charlie Tips will be released throughout this coming week on the search for Brian Laundrie. And before you leave, please make sure to check with the show notes in the description area of our podcasts, for there we will have the important hotline numbers for domestic assault and information regarding the finding of Brian Laundrie. We're going to have a link to the summary of the Casey Anthony case, a link to the body cam of the traffic stop, along with the 911 call that first alerted us to domestic abuse in their relationship. So, until this time next time, this is Charlie Crimebuster urging you to stay safe, to stay alert. For my friend, the life you save may very well be your very own.